And we've got a very fun question here from a listener in our Discord. Goes by the username of Doug Rice. Is that his actual name? Is it a fake name? We don't know. A lot of people on Discord have some very interesting profiles, but Doug asked a very interesting question earlier today. He said, which do you think we'll have more of? Wins in the non-conference slate or losses in the SEC schedule? And I want to start here with Kentucky's non-conference slate, kind of what they've done in the past, and we'll look at this year's schedule. This is a fun question. I think that you're going to find it may be a little bit more tight of a race here than you may originally expect. So Kentucky, this upcoming season, we've talked about this a few different times. Once they get the full non-con slate, we'll have a much better answer to this question. But as of right now, here are the teams that they have scheduled. Duke, Clemson, Gonzaga in Seattle, and Mark Pope is 1-8 versus the Zags, by the way. Louisville, Ohio State, Western Kentucky, and Lipscomb. Duke, Clemson, and Gonzaga are going to be very difficult games. Louisville, Ohio State, Western Kentucky, and Lipscomb are all winnable. Ohio State probably being the most difficult team out of those back four, but that's 7 games scheduled, right? So it's more of wins in the non-con or losses in the SEC. I think you can say for certain, not for certain, but confidently, Kentucky's going to have a good chance to beat Louisville, Ohio State, Western Kentucky, and Lipscomb. So that's 4 games there. We'll call them wins for now. So that's 4 wins in the non-con so far. Kentucky and most college basketball teams typically play 13 non-conference games. Kentucky in the past has hovered over the last several years somewhere between 9 to 11 non-conference victories. If you want to go back to last year, if I'm not mistaken, it was 9. Before they played, obviously, I think Gonzaga later on in the year and lost, and but it's usually somewhere between 9 to 11 of the 13 games Kentucky ends up winning. So 6 extra games here that are going to end up being scheduled for the Wildcats, and I don't think any of those games are going to be tough. If you look at last year's schedule, obviously you had Kansas, Miami, North Carolina, Louisville, Gonzaga, but you also had New Mexico State, Texas A&M Commerce, Stonehill, St. Joseph's, Marshall, UNC Wilmington that Kentucky eventually lost, Penn, Illinois State. You had a lot of different games here that Kentucky just kind of gobbled up some wins in the non-con slate against some relatively easy competition. Hopefully Kentucky wouldn't falter in any of those types of games this upcoming season. We'll just say here, for argument's sake, the 6 games that Kentucky schedules, outside of these 7 we already know, we'll say Kentucky wins all of them. We'll just say the Wildcats are able to win all of those. So 6 and 4, there's 10 potentially for the Wildcats. Let's say Kentucky ends up losing to Ohio State or Louisville, and they end up losing to Clemson, Duke, and the Zags. We'll just say Kentucky gets out with 9 wins, okay? I think at that point, you have to ask the question, how good is the SEC this upcoming season? How good are they really? Because I think, and I expressed some of this opinion on yesterday's show, I think the SEC has a very, very good top half of the league. And I think they're going to be very deep this season. It's going to be a bloodbath, much like it was a season ago. But there are some teams in this preseason that are being, I think, hyped up a little too much, that Kentucky ends up playing, and I think that genuinely on paper, the Wildcats roster is either better than or much better than. I think you are going to see some teams that are currently expected to perform very well or well in the SEC not do so hot. And you're going to see some teams that are surprises, and we could go over those on a later show, but as of right now, I just want to say this. You get 7 teams on the road. You get 8 teams at home if you're Kentucky for the SEC slate. is this team, this Wildcats team, going to split that home and away stretch 9-9 or 8-10? I think on paper, the Wildcats are better than 500 in the SEC. This should be the deepest team in this conference. In terms of rotation and in terms of bench minutes, this should be the deepest team in the SEC. This also should be one of the most experienced teams in the country, if not the most. Kentucky's going to rely on that. This should be one of the better three-point shooting teams in this conference. Kentucky's going to rely on that. I think that all of these things combined are going to lead to the Wildcats winning most of their home stretch, I should say, and a decent amount of games on the road. The Wildcats are going to lean on seniority and wisdom and maturity and understanding from some of these older players. These players are going to go into these road environments and know how to get the job done, especially if they have chemistry with each other and especially if they're knocking down outside shots. They're going to come into games at home. They're going to play confident. They're going to play strong. They're going to play aggressive. They're going to play with momentum and tempo, and they're going to shoot threes, and they're probably going to make a lot. 9-9 or worse? I think it's difficult to imagine, honestly, for the Wildcats this season. And I want to ask you guys, before we kind of break down this SEC slate, which do you think we'll have more of? Wins in the non-con or losses in the SEC? I think this team is above 500 in the SEC, and I think at the least you're looking at 9 wins in the non-conference slate. Probably 10, and if you can get a win against a team like Clemson, you could be looking at 11. If you beat Duke, you could genuinely go 12-1 or 13-0. It's on the table. Kentucky could beat all of these teams, but if we're being conservative, 9-9 is tough. It's not tough to imagine, but it's difficult to get there, especially when we start to break down some of these games. Let's go ahead and break down some of these games. Before I do that, though, I want to remind you guys, if you have not subscribed to the show already, whether that be on YouTube, whether it be on podcast, I would greatly appreciate it. And we mentioned earlier, Doug here from the Locked On Kentucky Discord, appreciate this question. If you want to join the Locked On Kentucky Discord, you can find it pinned at the top of my Twitter profile, and you'll see it right here on YouTube at @LanceDawe_ on X/Twitter. You can head over there. It's pinned. It's a link to join. It's free to join. Just a place for all of us to chat about Kentucky basketball, Kentucky baseball, Kentucky football, which we'll get into here in just a few weeks. SEC Media Days, by the way, coming up in just a couple of weeks. Interested to see what Mark Stoops has to say. But yeah, if you want to join the Locked On Kentucky Discord, link is, again, at @LanceDawe_. All right, wrapping up the Friday edition or Tuesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Wow, I have no idea why I thought it was Friday, but it is not. It is Tuesday. And we've got a fun question here from Doug Rice asking, which do you think we'll have more of, wins in the non-con or losses in the SEC? The non-conference slate, I think Kentucky should get at least 9 or more wins in their non-con slate. At least that's what I'm expecting from this team. I expect them to be good. I expect them to have success early in the season because of their seniority. We'll see how they gel over the next couple of months. Hopefully we hear good things. But now I want to turn my attention to the SEC slate. So let's just say 9 games in the non-con. And the question here was, which do you think we'll have more of, wins in the non-con or losses in the SEC? Let's look at Kentucky's home games this upcoming season. Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, Georgia, LSU, Mississippi State, Tennessee, and Texas. I want to be clear here. Kentucky could lose every single one of these games. They could lose them all. They could go 0-31 this season. Who knows? But if we're looking on paper, we're looking at the fact that this is Rupp Arena. We are expecting this team to be strong offensively and either average or above average defensively. Much better than they were a season ago, I hope. I think that Kentucky can beat a lot of these teams at home. I think they can beat Arkansas. I think they can beat Georgia. I think they can beat LSU. Right now, I think they can beat Mississippi State. And I think they can beat Texas. Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee. Those are the 3 games that concern me. Let's just say, for argument's sake, worst comes to worst, Kentucky goes 5-3 over their 8 home games. Let's take a look at the away games then. Florida, Ole Miss, Missouri, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma. The fact that we have to play A&M on the road this year disgusts me. But nonetheless, we gotta. I don't know why I've been filled with so much hate recently for the Aggies. If you watched yesterday's show, you saw a lot of that. I'm sorry. Wade Taylor's a good player. They just can't shoot efficiently. The team can't as a whole. And I'm a big analytics guy, and if it's not good from an analytics perspective, I'm probably not going to love it. Frankly, I don't think you should. But if you look at those away games, I think Kentucky can win at least 4 of those. I think you can beat Ole Miss. I think you can beat Missouri. I think you could beat South Carolina. I think you can beat Vanderbilt. If you go 4-3, then all of a sudden, you're looking at 9. You're looking at 9 wins in the SEC. You're looking at Kentucky picking up 500 minimum. So let's just go through here one more time. You've got Alabama at home. We'll just call it a loss. We'll call Arkansas a win. We'll call Auburn a loss, even though Auburn hasn't won in Rupp Arena and goodness knows how long, regardless of how good their teams have been. We'll call Georgia a win. We'll call LSU a win. We'll call Mississippi State a win. We'll call Tennessee a loss. We'll call Texas a win. We'll call Florida on the road a loss. We'll call Ole Miss a win. We'll call Missouri a win. South Carolina a win. Vanderbilt a win. Texas A&M a loss. We'll call Oklahoma a loss for fun. And I just need to pull this up here. SEC opponents, just to make sure I'm not missing anything. The Kentucky Wildcats right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 losses in the SEC slate. I think that Kentucky can pull this off. I think that's worst case scenario for the Wildcats. This makes sense to me. Also, just want to point out here, the games that I'm not including, the 3 games I'm missing here, at Alabama, and then you also have to play at Tennessee. And if I'm not mistaken, you also have to play at home against Vanderbilt and then on the road at Vandy. So I think Kentucky could genuinely they could knock out some more. They could knock out some more games than maybe some people anticipate. This is a 10-8 team or better in SEC play. That's where I sit with it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Could the Kentucky Wildcats finish with more losses in SEC play or more wins in the non-conference slate? I think that you are looking at 10-8 or better, and I really don't see Kentucky winning less than 9 games in the non-conference schedule. I think they'll probably get to 10 or 11, genuinely. The final thing I wanted to note here before we wrap up the show, CBS Sports recently put out some college basketball rankings, like a way too early top 25 and 1. Kentucky's schedule, I don't think, and we may do a whole episode on this soon, I don't think people understand just how difficult this could be for Kentucky this upcoming season. If this top 25 holds, which it probably won't, but let's just say, for sake of argument, it does. Kentucky plays 10 of these top 25 teams. Alabama, Gonzaga, Auburn, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Tennessee, Ohio State, Texas, Florida. That's rough. That is really, really tough. Ohio State also being in the top 25 is a shock to me, but CBS can do what they want. Ask can ESPN. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Kentucky basketball schedule is rough. Could they have some struggles across the board, or could they find a lot more success, at least, than what they had last season?